Good Shabbos. One of the questions that I was asked when I first spoke with the search committee here and with Ronald was, did I give political sermons? And I said, no, I don't give political sermons. Usually I don't give political sermons because I'm not a politician. I'm not really even good at that. And I certainly don't feel like I know more than you know about most of what's going on in U.S. and international politics. I might have my opinion, you have your opinions. And when I do speak about things that are going on in the world, generally I try to speak about establishing a Jewish vocabulary. Is there a Jewish way to think about this? Rather than what's the right way to think about it? Can I give Jewish vocabulary, a Jewish framework for people to make up their own minds? I would much rather have you make up your own minds. But I want to talk today about a few things that are going on in the world, and not to talk about it in a political way, but in a strongly worded way. And I'm going to try to tie together a number of things that have been going on which may seem like they're disparate or not really connected, but I'm going to try to draw a line through them and connect them. Part of why I'm speaking about it in this way now is, well, my own emotional state. Usually, I'm not worried. I have a lot of equanimity. I don't really get too worried about how things are going. But I'm worried. And usually I don't get angry about things. Again, I try to have equanimity and to be prepared for what comes my way, and not to get angry about things. But I'm a little bit angry. So I'm worried and I'm angry. So I got to talk about it. Okay? But don't worry. I'm not angry at you. So we're good. Okay. The first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about the Amnesty International Report on Israel. I don't know if you follow this kind of news. Generally, I try to stay away from the news. I really do think it's unhealthy these days. But I also try to stay in touch a little bit because I think it's also important to know what's going on. So I try to have small doses. But if you're in the Jewish world, and if you're in the Jewish world that I'm in, you've heard that Amnesty International, generally a very well-respected and important organization, not against them or what they do, made a report about Israel and the occupation of Palestinian territory by Israel. And they called it apartheid. Now, that's not the first time. Other big organizations have claimed that Zionism is a kind of apartheid and Zionism is a kind of racism. And I want to think about that with the idea that's behind it. I don't want to just reject it out of hand, because that's not in our interest. I want to try to understand this. And I want to share with you two things that I heard from two of my colleagues with regards to this. One is from our colleague Eli Garfinkel, wonderful, fantastic rabbi, author, very talented preacher and dynamic teacher. He says, why should we care about Amnesty International? I mean, really, right? Like, big deal. Someone said something against Israel, like, what else is new? He said there's two reasons. One is because they are taken seriously. People do not reject them out of hand. What they say, people take seriously. People of good conscience. Much of the work that they do is actually very important. So when they say something, people are listening. Important people who we should be concerned about are listening. Even our own people are listening. He said the second reason we should be concerned about this is because by associating Israel and Zionism with apartheid, it makes Zionism a kind of misinformation. To be a supporter of Israel and Zionism becomes to become a supporter of something which cannot be supported, which is unfactual and wrong and misinformation, and will come to be treated as wrong thinking. This is a pernicious and evil idea. No matter how true it may be about the conditions that Palestinians live under. I also want to share with you my colleague Zev Farber, who lives in Israel. He's an Orthodox rabbi. He teaches at the Hartman Institute. He's the main editor of Torah.com, an important, good, wonderful tool for teaching Torah. He's a serious scholar. Used to teach at Emory in Atlanta and made Aliyah a number of years ago. He says, and he asked the question, is Zionism apartheid? And he says, like we talked about this morning, it depends on what you mean by the word. He says, if what you mean by that word is the apartheid of South Africa, where there is legislative discrimination against whole classes of people, he says, well, then it is patently untrue. Israel is not an apartheid state. Its Arab and Muslim populations are represented in the Knesset. They sit on important Knesset committees. Every Israeli citizen, no matter their ethnic origin or their religion, votes. There are Arab members of Knesset. In apartheid South Africa, there were no black members of the parliament. Black people did not get to vote, did not get to participate equally in the economics of the country. All of those things are not true in Israel today. But if what you mean is that the Palestinian people suffer under terrible discrimination, well, then it is true. You see, that idea is a little bit true. It's a little bit true. And it's important for us to think about it as a little bit true because, well, we care about Israel, so we have to care about what it does. And then we have to have an argument of good faith amongst ourselves for what to do about it. But we cannot pretend like everything is wonderful and hunky-dory for the Palestinians there, because it is not. We all know that's true. And so this idea that it should actually help us to become better at who we are, even though its intention may be to make the situation for the Palestinians better, the idea is false. It is not true. And therefore, its consequences will be very negative. Falsehoods have negative consequences. And the Amnesty International Report is going to have negative consequences for us. And we have to be careful and cautious about it. Whether you knew about it or not, you should be concerned. The next thing I want to talk about, I'm sure you heard this one too, is about Whoopi Goldberg. And I don't actually want to talk about Whoopi Goldberg and the Holocaust, because I think this is a profound misunderstanding of what was wrong with what she did and what she said. For those of you who don't know, Whoopi Goldberg, the actress, is on a TV show called The View, in which a number of people sit and discuss the topics of the day, and they all express different points of view, and it's a lively conversation. On that show, in response to the pulling of Mouse, the cartoon graphic novel about the Holocaust, from the library of Tennessee public schools, certain Tennessee public schools, Whoopi made a comment about how the Holocaust wasn't really about race, but rather about a larger concern of man's inhumanity to man. It wasn't about something which happened to the Jews and specific other ethnic groups. It was a larger conflict. And many people were upset by what she said about the Holocaust, but that was not what upset me about it. What she said about the Holocaust was just wrong. And that's okay to be wrong. And she, in some ways, corrected the error which she did. The error, however, that concerned me was more about the nature of Jewish identity itself. She positioned herself as an authority on what it means to be a Jew and who Jews really are. She said the Holocaust was not about race because, and this is a quote, it was just a disagreement between two groups of white people. That is the problem with what she said. The whiteness of Jews. That is a pernicious and false idea. First of all, it's false on its face. Not all Jews are white. Yeah, that's right. Now, it's partly true. See, that's the thing about dangerous ideas and falsehoods. They're partly true. The idea that Jews are white, it's an important thing to think about it that way. Because historically, at least in America, at least in my lifetime, and probably the lifetime of my parents, Jews have enjoyed some of the privilege of whiteness. We have, basically, white skin. At least some. And so, because we can pass, we have enjoyed much of the privilege which white people have enjoyed in this country. And we have not been denied in the same way which people of dark skin have been denied. And the idea of Jewish whiteness is not just important to understand that and to understand our own experience in that way, but is to remind us that there is plenty of dyed-in-the-wool racism within the Jewish community. Yeah, that's right. Calling it out unequivocally. And we have an obligation, just like everybody else, to clean up our own backyard and to make sure that we are not perpetuating the horrible infection of racism and that kind of whiteness. Yeah, we have that on us too. But here is the thing. That does not mean that Jews are white, or that Whoopi Goldberg gets to decide who and what we are. It's an association of us, not as an oppressed minority, but as the oppressor. It's a reversal of our fortune in order to minimize and diminish our own experience and to associate us with parts of our broader culture which are broadly hated. And whether it's from the right side of the political spectrum or the left side of the political spectrum, that is a pernicious and insipid idea. It's a falsehood. And its consequences will be profoundly negative. I sat on a call this past week about bomb threats to historically black colleges and universities and Jewish and black religious institutions. Ask any white supremacist if Jews are white. They don't think so. Our passing, it isn't passing. We are targeted in the same way as the darker-skinned Jews who are part of our community. We're in that same boat. The third thing I want to talk about, that's not enough. It's all right, there's a third thing. Third thing I want to talk about is the hostage-taking of the rabbi and parishioners at the Colleyville synagogue. Like I said, I'm worried. I'm usually not worried. But apparently, we live in a world where kidnapping and taking hostage rabbis and their parishioners in synagogue is something that you got to think about. That guy took them hostage because they were Jewish. It's overt, and everybody knows this. And he did so because he thought that the Jews control things, that somehow this rabbi would know other rabbis, and those rabbis would know, people in power, and they could make something happen for him. Well, is that a partially true idea? I want to say, yeah. We are a remarkable people. We are an unusual people. We say it about ourselves, and I say it proudly. The Jewish people are a remarkable people, capable of remarkable things. And we should take pride in the accomplishment of our community, of our heritage, our tradition. We are very influential. Yeah, because we're thoughtful and intentional and care about the world around us. But the notion that we somehow have control is a pernicious and evil falsehood. And its consequences are that some might think that they can just walk into synagogue and point a gun at the clergy and the parishioners. I got news for you. Right now, today, as we speak, there are organized people in Alabama seeking to do you and me harm. And I don't mean little bits of harm, I mean like real stuff. Those falsehoods, those ideas, they have consequences, regardless of whether they have some intention or some aspect which is true or beneficial. It doesn't matter. Falsehoods are false, and they always lead to inevitable negative consequences. Those guys in Colleyville are lucky. Here's another idea that has consequence. Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha. Adonai, rise up. We have enemies. Yafutzu oivecha, scatter them and their counsel. Yanusu misanecha mipanecha. Those people who hate us and seek to spread lies and falsehoods about us, they are our enemies. Their ideas are falsehoods. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah u'devar Adonai miYerushalayim. Torah and Jewish wisdom come out of this place. Our culture and our community thrive here and belong here, and we belong and thrive in Zion and in Eretz Yisrael. That idea is true, and it also has consequence. That idea means that you and I have to redouble our devotional effort to build Jewish life and culture proudly and out in the world. We have to engage actively in making our community and country better, not just for us, for everyone. We have to shout Torah from the rooftop. And we have to be careful and be protected and defended within our house of worship. We cannot take falsehoods and their consequences lightly. Ideas have consequence. Let our ideas, our understanding of the truth, have the incredible and powerful consequence to build our Jewish culture and to keep us defended and protected. Shabbat Shalom.